In the heart of a vast medieval kingdom, where torches flickered against the stone walls of ancient palaces, a dynasty ruled that was feared as much as it was respected. Its kings were known for their ruthlessness, its queens for their icy elegance, and its heirs for one thing above all: pure blood. For centuries, the royal family believed that mixing their lineage with outsiders would weaken their divine power. And so, one by one, generation after generation, cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces, and the bloodline grew tighter, darker, and more fragile. At the center of this legacy stood the queen, young, striking, and bound by chains no one could see. She had been raised since childhood to understand her duty: keep the blood pure, no matter the cost. She had watched portraits of ancestors whose faces seemed twisted by the very curse they tried to hide. Some had been born frail and sickly, others with minds that wandered into madness. But these stories were whispered only in corridors, always hushed when royalty walked past. When she turned 18, the council arranged her marriage, not to a foreign prince, not even to a distant noble, but to her own blood. For the stability of the kingdom, they said. For the purity of the throne. She did not cry. Queens were not allowed to cry. She wore her crown like a shield and accepted her fate. Yet deep inside, she felt a fear she could never voice. The kingdom, blinded by tradition, saw the union as a triumph. Bells rang through every village, torches lit up the night sky, and the people believed a new era was beginning. They hoped for an heir, a symbol of continuity, a child who would carry centuries of royal power. But the queen knew better. She had heard her mother's last words before she died. "Our blood is not blessed. It is poisoned." Months passed, and soon the queen learned she was with child. The court erupted in celebration. Advisors bowed deeper, servants moved with new urgency, and the king, cold, distant, and shaped by the same twisted legacy, declared that the gods had favored them. But the queen did not feel favored. Her dreams grew darker. She woke each night sweating, feeling something shifting within her. Not gently, as a normal child would, but violently, as if struggling against its own creation. The palace physicians offered explanations. "All royal children bring discomfort," they said. "It is the weight of destiny." But she knew these were lies designed to protect the throne's image. Each night she would sit in the great oak chair in her chambers, hand resting on her swelling belly, wondering what she had condemned herself, and her kingdom, to. She remembered the stories of infants born pale as ghosts, of children who never spoke, of princes whose eyes were mismatched, whose bodies grew malformed before they even reached manhood. Now she feared she would add another name to that secret list. As the candles burned low and the halls grew silent, the queen whispered to herself, "This is not destiny. This is a curse." And deep within her, the unborn child stirred. Slowly at first, then with a jolt that made her gasp. It was the first true sign that her nightmare had only begun. The queen's pregnancy should have been a season of joy, but within the palace walls it became a season of whispers. Servants walked more quietly, advisors exchanged uneasy glances, and even the king's expression tightened whenever he passed her chambers. Something was wrong. Everyone sensed it, yet no one dared speak it aloud. From the very first months, her body reacted in ways the midwives could not explain. Her skin grew pale, almost translucent, as though the child was draining life from her. She fainted often, waking to find physicians hovering over her with mixtures of herbs and prayers. But none of their remedies eased the unease growing inside her. At night, her dreams became horrifyingly vivid. She saw hallways filled with portraits of past rulers, their painted faces cracking, their twisted features reaching out as if warning her. She saw the royal bloodline turning upon itself like a serpent biting its tail. And always, at the end of each nightmare, she saw a child. Small, fragile, and unnatural. Every morning she awoke with the sensation that the nightmares had followed her into reality. The kingdom outside knew nothing of her torment. They celebrated her pregnancy with festivals, songs, and offerings to the gods. Priests declared the unborn child a blessing, a sign of the royal family's divine perfection. But behind closed doors, the oldest members of the council exchanged murmurs that were far from celebratory. "You know what happened to King Alaric's firstborn," one whispered. "And Queen Morena's twins," muttered another. "It is the price of purity," an elder hissed. "We all knew this day would come again." The queen heard fragments of these conversations through closed doors and castle corridors. They haunted her more than her nightmares. She realized the truth. The sickness in the royal line was not a secret. It was a shadow that had followed them for centuries, one the council had hidden beneath crowns, ceremonies, and rituals. Still, no one dared challenge the tradition that had cursed them. As her pregnancy advanced, the physicians' concern grew. They noticed the child's movements were irregular, too strong at times, too still at others. One night, a physician, his voice trembling, warned the queen in private. "My lady, the signs are worrying. The child may not be." He stopped himself, glancing nervously toward the door. "If the council learns of my doubts, I will lose my head," he whispered. "But you must prepare yourself." Before she could speak, he bowed and fled the room, leaving her alone with her sinking heart. The queen's isolation deepened. Even the king visited her less often, as though he feared what her womb contained. When he did come, he placed a hand on her shoulder with the stiffness of a man touching a cursed object. "The air will be strong," he said, but his eyes betrayed dread. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, the queen felt a sudden, violent jolt from within her. She gasped, clutching her stomach. It was not the movement of a child. It felt like something twisting, struggling, pushing against the confines of her body. For the first time, she screamed. Servants rushed to her chambers, but by the time they arrived, she sat trembling, eyes wide with terror. "The baby moved," she whispered. "But not like a baby. Not like anything I have ever felt." Her words chilled the room. No one dared answer. And from that night onward, the palace feared more than ever what the queen was about to bring into the world. The night the queen went into labor, the skies above the kingdom erupted with thunder. Winds howled through the palace corridors, rattling windows and extinguishing candles, as if nature itself sensed what was about to unfold. Servants ran through the halls, summoning midwives, heating water, and preparing the queen's chamber. But beneath their frantic movements was a fear they could not hide. For months they had heard the rumors. For months they had watched the queen grow weaker while her stomach twisted unnaturally. And now, as her screams tore through the stone walls, many whispered that history was repeating itself. Inside her chamber, the queen lay drenched in sweat, gripping the sheets as waves of pain surged through her. The midwives tried to comfort her, but their hands trembled. One of them had assisted in a royal birth decades earlier, a birth that had been erased from the official record. Now she feared she would witness another. "Push, my queen," one whispered, though her own voice cracked. "You must push." The queen obeyed, her breath ragged, her heart pounding like a war drum. The pain was unlike anything she had imagined. Sharp, violent, as if her body were being torn open from within. Each contraction felt like a warning, a final reminder of the curse that had haunted her bloodline. Outside the heavy chamber doors, the king waited, flanked by council members. Their faces were stiff masks hiding the same unease. Candles flickered as the queen's cries echoed into the corridor. Some of the men bowed their heads in dread. Others whispered prayers. "It must be a healthy heir," one counselor murmured. "We cannot endure another shame." "Silence," another snapped. "Whatever is born tonight must serve the throne." Inside, the queen's vision blurred. The room spun, and then, a final scream, a final push. Silence. The silence was worse than the pain. The midwives stared at the newborn child, their expressions shifting from shock to confusion, to something deeper, fear mixed with pity. The queen, gasping for breath, lifted her head weakly. "What is it?" she whispered. "Let me see." The head midwife hesitated. For a heartbeat, she considered lying. But the queen's eyes, wide, desperate, pleading, forced the truth forward. She placed the infant in the queen's arms. He was alive. He was breathing. But he bore the signs of a bloodline stretched too thin for too many generations. His features were painfully delicate, his limbs frail, his skin marked with subtle abnormalities that spoke of centuries of genetic entrapment. His tiny face twisted not with malice, but with struggle, as though his body fought simply to exist. The queen did not recoil. She did not scream. She stared at him with a grief so deep it hollowed her soul. "My child," she whispered. "My precious child." Outside, the king demanded, "Is the air healthy?" The midwives exchanged frozen glances. Inside the chamber, the queen held her son close, tears streaking down her face. She felt the weight of generations pressing upon her. She felt the cold breath of the council's judgment approaching. And as thunder cracked across the sky, she realized the true horror. Not the child she had brought into the world, but the world that was now preparing to destroy him. Word of the birth spread through the palace faster than wildfire. No one dared say it aloud, yet every servant, guard, and advisor felt the same chill wrap around their spine. The heir had been born, alive but fragile, marked by the unmistakable signs of a bloodline that had been pushed past its limits. When the king entered the chamber, his face was carved from stone. The queen sat against her pillows, cradling the infant protectively in her arms. Her eyes were red from tears, but her grip was firm, fiercer than anyone had ever seen from her. The king looked at the child only briefly, not long enough to acknowledge him as a son, just long enough to know the truth. "The council must see him," he said quietly. "No," the queen answered, voice trembling. "Not yet. He needs rest. I need rest." "This is not a request," he replied, his tone colder. The queen's heart pounded as a cluster of elders entered the room. Cloaked in heavy robes embroidered with the symbols of the royal house, they approached slowly, like judges coming to deliver a verdict. One by one, they examined the child, studying his weak breathing, his frail limbs, the small involuntary tremors that shook his body. The oldest counselor stepped back with a sigh heavy enough to feel like a death sentence. "It has happened again." The queen lifted her chin. "He is alive. He is my son." "He may not survive the winter," another muttered. "Then we give him the best care," the queen snapped. But the council wasn't listening. They were already calculating the consequences, the rumors that would spread, the nobles who would rebel, the foreign kingdoms who would mock them. A king with a weak heir meant a weak throne. "We must consider the stability of the kingdom," the eldest counselor said. The queen's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" The men shifted uncomfortably. It was the king who finally spoke. "The child may need to be hidden." "Hidden?" Her voice cracked into a mix of fury and heartbreak. "He is the future king." A younger counselor stepped forward. "My queen, forgive me, but the people expect a strong heir. If they see him as he is." "As he is?" she repeated, teeth clenched. "He is human. He is a child." "But they will not see him that way," the elder said firmly. "They will see a warning. They will blame you. They will blame the throne. Fear is powerful, my queen. It destroys faster than armies." The queen looked down at her son. His small fingers curled around hers with surprising strength, as if he understood the danger surrounding him. Her throat tightened. "You want to take him," she whispered. "To hide him, or worse?" No one answered. The silence said everything. A storm of emotions surged through her. Rage, terror, sorrow, and an unshakable instinct she had never felt before. She realized this council did not see a baby. They saw a political threat, and in that moment she made her choice. She clutched her son close, shielding his tiny body with her arms. "No one," she said, her voice trembling but unbreakable, "will touch him." The council exchanged grim glances. The king looked away. Everyone understood the same truth. A war was beginning, not between kingdoms, but inside the palace itself. The queen knew the council would not let the matter rest. Their silence in the chamber had been the calm before the storm. And in the days that followed, their whispers filled every hallway of the palace. Servants avoided her eyes. Guards shifted uneasily at their posts. Even the king, once distant but predictable, now watched her with a cold uncertainty, like a man calculating a sacrifice he didn't want to make. Her son grew weaker with each passing day, yet he clung to life with a will that astonished the midwives. His breathing was soft but steady. His tiny hands reached for her whenever she drew near. He was fragile, yes, but he was alive. And to the queen that was enough. But to the throne it was not. Late one night, long after the torches in the corridor had burned low, the queen overheard the council in the adjoining chamber. She pressed her ear to the wooden door, heart racing. "We cannot allow this heir to represent the kingdom," one whispered. "The nobles will revolt," said another. "If the queen refuses to act," the elder counselor said quietly, "then we must." The queen's breath caught. "An illness," he continued. "A quiet passing. The people will mourn a tragedy, not a scandal." Her blood turned to ice. They meant to take her baby. She backed away from the door, trembling so violently she nearly collapsed. The horror of their plan pressed down on her like a weight on her chest. She ran to her son's cradle, scooping him into her arms, feeling his small warmth against her skin. "I will not let them," she whispered. "I will not." That night, as the palace slept, the queen acted. She wrapped her child in soft wool, tightened her cloak around her shoulders, and slipped through hidden corridors built generations earlier, passageways only queens knew. Her footsteps were silent, but her heart thundered as though the entire castle could hear it. At the far end of the palace grounds stood an old stone chapel, abandoned since her grandmother's time. It was a place forgotten by the council, tucked behind crumbling walls and overgrown vines. The queen pushed open its wooden door with trembling hands and stepped inside. Moonlight streamed through the broken roof, illuminating the dust-filled air. She laid her baby in the center of the chapel, lighting a small lantern beside him. A soft cry escaped him, not of pain but of recognition. He reached for her. Tears filled her eyes. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Forgive me, my son." She wasn't abandoning him. She wasn't giving him to fate. She was giving him a chance. Moments later, footsteps echoed outside. Torches flickered. The council had discovered her escape. The queen kissed her son's forehead and hid behind one of the stone pillars, watching through a crack as a trusted servant. One she had secretly arranged. Slipped into the chapel, lifted the child gently, and vanished into the night. By the time the council burst in, the baby was gone. All they found was the queen, standing before them with dry eyes and a steady voice. "The heir is dead," she lied, her heart shattering with every word. "A fever took him moments ago." Shock, anger, confusion. But no one dared accuse a grieving queen. And as the council left to prepare,